when we sit there and talk about risk and how to evaluate, how to manage it and whatnot, one of the ones I get quite frequently, and I love this a lot, is, oh, I don't have to worry about the video. I can go into the system anytime and download it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I had a client who literally 8 months to the day went in to go download that video and it was gone because their telematics provider had wiped everything else. They didn't realize that in the contract, it said, we wiped the servers at 6 months because we're trying to save you space. Yep.
But yeah, that's one of the big things is don't lean on that being available. Get it right away and download it right away, because you never know what's going to happen. Either intentionally, part of the contract, or unintentionally. In today's world with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, with telematics being a big hot topic, and let's kind of shift it a little bit towards the best practice approach, where Rick and I try to work with our clients and help them understand that utilize this information to improve your operation, adjust driver behavior and whatnot. It'd be great to hear you speak on the fact of you've got this available. However, as a transportation motor carrier, you're not utilizing it. And what can that do to you in the event of a court situation?
Well, we did a focus group with a court analysis company one time. They reached out. We did it online. Reached out and got, I think it was about 12 jurors, and we had a hypothetical case, and we ran it by them. Company with about 35 units. They had one safety director. He was in charge of reviewing the data, over speeds, hard brakes. He would then issue the progressive discipline on the thing. But with 35 units and with that type of data coming in, he was like, those fellows back in the day on the Ed Sullivan show trying to keep the spinning plates going. Now, I don't know that anybody but the three of us remembers that, guys, but,
I remember him.
And so it was a situation where in our hypothetical, but these jurors thought it was a real case.
Yep.
This driver rear-ended a line of cars, killed two people, and had an overspeed pending from a couple weeks prior, second or third, but hadn't been disciplined on it before. The jury was understandably unforgiving in that regard and awarded punitive drivers against them. I gave a speech to the American Trucking Association a couple of years ago about data and went through a progression. Number one, most important thing for companies is identify what you have. Many companies don't know what they have until the accident reconstructionist and I get involved after the accident. The accident reconstructionist will go in and find sources of data, Bendix systems, Wingman, things that they didn't even know was out there. When you do that and then analyze it, what is the data that relates to the accidents and the crashes you're having? If you run the GW in New York, from Jersey to New York, Fort Washington, it's probably hard brakes. If you're running I-80 in Nebraska, it's probably overspeed. Look at that, get your KPI, and then manage that KPI. Focus on that. Have a reason so that when you're asking that deposition, why you do this, so that you can say, I'm glad you asked that question. Here's what we found, here's our analysis, and here's what we have. And then once you manage it, you got to be prepared to discipline it. I know in today's world we need drivers, but think how many miles your good drivers have to go to pay for that one bad driver that you didn't want to let go. Or when you go, I could discipline them, but we'd lose that load. Well, how much is that load worth? Because in today's litigation, I haven't seen the load worth a nuclear verdict yet. So that's kind of the whole thing on it, John.
Well, and I was going to say, from a retention aspect, that exact same scenario applies, because if you're not going to discipline your bad guys, your good guys are going to sit here and go, oh, what am I doing here? If they don't care, why should I care?
It's like a middle school classroom. And I don't say that in degradation to the drivers, but just from a general situation, the good kids are going, what's the worst of being, what's the use of being good?
Exactly.
And what you've done is to set the norm, set the culture, because I'll be doing a podcast and webinar, I'll be posting it online, but it's called Safety by Slogan. And the short version is, spoiler alert, you're not going to release this ahead of time, are you, John?
No.
Okay.
Yep.
No, you're safe.
I'm kidding. Spoiler alert is this. And if the folks don't have it by now from listening to you guys, they really need to get it. Safety is not a slogan, it's a culture.
Yes.
And the culture starts at the top.
Yep.
And if somebody says, we have two courses, safety or, then you don't have the safety culture.
Right. Yep.
It has to be safety, period.
Correct. I use a phrase quite frequently when I'm speaking with clients and even drivers for that matter. I don't know any driver that wants to be a bad driver. They just don't know how to be a good driver, and hence where that training, mentoring, education, and utilizing tools like telematics data to help them better understand where their pitfalls are, where they can strengthen it up. Most people, and it doesn't matter whether you're a driver or any type of career you have, that constructive criticism to help make me better at my role and my responsibility should always be absorbed, because it's like, I'm going to excel in my career. It's no different than the driver who maybe one day could become the top trainer or driver mentor of your organization. Or maybe he goes on to become an instructor, or who knows? We've seen it before. They become the CEO of the company, So it all comes back to, how do I share that information to help my people be better?
Or they could become a safety manager.
Yep.
Yep.
It comes down to coaching.
Yes.
And that's why all the sports teams in every league have video coaches now.
Yep.
The coach of the Miami Heat, he started out as a video coach and moved his way up. But it's a thing of, there's principles of behavioral economy, behavioral psychology. And I gave a talk to the American Trucking Association about this a couple years ago. Recency and accessibility. So that when you show them the video, it's a coaching moment. And when they can see that, when it occurs later on, that vision is accessible to them so that they can react to that right away. Yep. And many times, just like athletes, and before I gave up golf, just realizing that I stink, I used to look at the videos and thinking I always kept my left arm straight. Yeah. And there's a lot of drivers who think, well, I didn't do that. You show them the video, and it's not punitive. And I think that's the other thing, John and Rick.
Yes.
Video is not a punitive thing. It is we're all in this together, and we're all trying to get this. And, the frustration to me sometimes is I see safety directors who look like their job is to crack the whip on the drivers rather than to elevate them, as you had said, to that level of excellence that we all want from drivers.
Yep. Yeah. We all have habits of some sort or another that we are just not aware of. And video can come back and tell us, even telematics, just knowing that I overspeed, going, I really don't pay attention to the speedometer. I'm listening and I'm thinking I'm okay, but I don't know. So a little coaching goes a long way. Next thing you know, I'm better for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So cool. So, well, one of the things that's really cool, and I think we're seeing it really evolve that much more, is in that telematics data that you're getting from your telematics provider, your hard speed, your braking, and all these different things and whatnot. We're now seeing it being overlaid through telematics platforms. So the folks that are capturing more data, and they're starting to look at regions, counties, not just states, but counties and different areas, overlaying it with theft of vehicles, theft of cargo, weather events, and stuff like that. So now we really drill down on driver behavior of going, okay, well, you're an overspeeder at the best of times. You're always 10 over all the time. However, I noticed when you're traveling across Nebraska through that snowstorm, you're still 10 over, and it's like you should be 10 to 20 under based on that snowstorm. So this is becoming compelling information that people can help. And I'm sure that's something that could be used against you in the event of another court situation.
Yeah, absolutely. The nuclear verdicts rarely come from the facts of the accident. Rarely, if ever.
True.
It is systemic failures that the plaintiff attorneys, the billboard folks, try to prey upon. And in the book, The Reptile Theory, and that has become the guidance for and the bane of many on this. It says right in the book, and I'm one of the few people who I think talk about it and who actually read the book on that. And what it says in there is that, you know, the accident or the mere negligence isn't going to inflame the reptile. And that's the word they use for the jurors, because they try to use that mentality. It's going to be something that needs corrected so that they can inflame the jurors to say the only way this company's going to correct it is if they get hit by a big verdict. So that's the type of thing on there that's going to look at. And you're exactly right. It's the systemic failures that come back to get the company.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think we're seeing too many motor carriers that don't pay attention to those words, those warnings that are being shared, and they're going, "It's not going to happen to me. I'm okay. I don't need to worry about what Doug says. It's not going to happen to me." Or I love this one going, "I'm from Canada. We don't have those up here," and it's like, but you travel to the US, and Challenger's a great example of that. You know, we never expected that from a top-notch carrier, and now all of a sudden they're dealing with it. So
yeah, the name, reputation, the practices of the companies, unfortunately, are not a shield to the threat of the nuclear verdicts that these folks, the billboard attorneys, are bringing. And we've seen that in the States with some of our better companies. But they look at and try to create a situation where they can create the juror version, or vision rather, that there needs to be a large verdict against these folks. And that's the world we live in, and that's what we have to do to take it away from them. I did a talk last year, and I still do it on occasion, called The Four Phases of Litigation. And in terms of going from least to what I think is most important is the litigation itself, because, you know, there's a lot to be done in litigation, but usually the die is cast. And in the States, at least 90 to 95% of the cases get settled. But the next most important is after the accident. You know, it's that time between when the accident happened and when you hear from the other attorney. Because if you sit back, you just let them gin up the damages on that. You got to be aggressive. And I talk about how to do that, including suing them first. If we have an argument on liability and we have an argument on damages. The next is the accident response. Look, we can talk about and rue the fate of those billboard attorneys out there, but we have an advantage none of them have. That's immediacy. Nobody knows about that accident before we do. And if we're not prepared and we don't act, then we have squandered our greatest of assets. But the most important thing, guys, and you know this because you live it, it's pre-accident. And I say, and a friend of mine from a trucking association says, he quotes me all the time, God bless, when I say, like, look, imagine you're on the witness stand today and you have to give your vision of the best safety program out there, and then create that vision today. Do it today. Because what you do after the accident is backfill. It's not evidence. You know, so that's how I think we have to approach this, because today is the most important time. I had an insurance company one time say to me that they value or look at nuclear verdicts like they do natural disasters. You know, that they hit, then a lot of times, well, let's think about it. We prepare for, in those areas of certain natural disasters, to be able to withstand them, to be able to make sure that we are systemically prepared for it. And that's what we have to do for these nuclear verdicts, or potential for nuclear verdicts in our industry.
Well, and unfortunately, I don't see them going away anytime soon.
There is, and part of that talk, I talk about how those billboard attorneys reinvest what they get into advertising, judicial elections, down the line, so that they have some legislative elections, so that they have protection from losing that advantage that they have in many of these cases.
Well, and the technology today is only strengthening that process, right? So opportunities to invest in the technology, you know, you'd mentioned it earlier, reconstructionists. You know, I think we're seeing more people getting into that realm of that expertise, forensic investigators as well. All that's there with this data. People want to know what's in there that can hurt me and what can be used against me.
And unfortunately, John, what I run into a lot of times is trucking companies going, well, if we look at it or if we know it or try to do this, then they'll use it against us and they'll discover it at, when we get in a lawsuit. And I call that the discovery fallacy. And unfortunately, a lot of it is bred by my brethren in the defense industry, and it's totally false. As you guys well know, the data's there. So either you're going to get ahead of it, analyze it, and write your own narrative, or you're going to abdicate it to those who are going to try to take your company for as much money as they can get.
Yeah.
About a year or so ago, there was a conference of the attorneys who sued trucking companies. And their whole morning was entitled Trucks, a Treasure Trove of Data. And then they had a number of seminars, what's there, how to get it admissible.
Wow.
You got to get ahead of it.
Yep.
You got to get ahead of it.
Would have been a good conference for some trucking people to show up to learn something new.
Generally, and I didn't look at this one, but generally, many of those, you have to certify that you don't defend trucking companies or that you don't defend or not a defense attorney before they let you in the door.
Wow. So you got to be on the plaintiff side. Yeah. Wow. Well, so a little twist off of that, and it's interesting because we're seeing it here in Canada. I don't know why I shouldn't say that. I know why the shift is happening, but it's sad that the shift is happening. From an insurance standpoint, so the last 20 years of my career have been in the insurance world. And what we're seeing is companies, particularly the smaller ones that don't really care that much, are actually lowering their policy limits. So it goes along with well, you know what, if I don't know about it, they can't come after me for it. And their thought process is, well, if I have lower limits, then they can't take me for everything. And they don't seem to realize that when the insurance company caps out, they're coming after your assets for the rest of it.
People, a lot of times people in trucking will come to me and they'll go, hey, Doug, you talk about this all the time. So what's the word? Should we, United States, we have required 750,000 limits. Unless you're hazmat, you have to have 1 million. Most people have at least 1 million. So, should I have the higher limits? If I have more limits, they'll just mean they'll want more or, to protect myself. And that's always a trade-off in the questionnaire. But what I'm seeing a lot of, John, is where companies, in order to slow the increase in premiums, because premiums aren't going down, but to slow the increase is they take on more of the risk themselves, be it a retention or be it deductible. Now, some people talk about being self-insured. Technically, you have to get approval from the FMCSA to do it. The last I heard, there's only 20-some companies approved.
Right.
But they have more skin in the game. And I've got folks that have between the first 50,000 up to the first million on that. And because of that, it makes it more important for you to be prepared, particularly in these low-level accidents, because it's what I call death by 1,000 cuts. $25,000 to $50,000 cost of defense. These people might not be hurt. You might not be at fault, but the insurance companies are ready to pay that amount in order to, and understandably, I can't fault them because it'll cost more, even without a risk factor in there for them to litigate the case on that. So that's where these companies are really getting hit on that low level, because that's right off the bottom line. That is what, and I'm working on an article for the next newsletter called Safety Profit, because too often I get the feeling that when safety directors go in to their companies, it's a question of well, you're a burden, you're a cost. But they're putting money back on the bottom line.
Oh God, yes.
The ATRI study a couple of years ago about insurance, and it's part of what I call the ATRI trilogy. They did the nuclear verdict study, they did the small verdict study relative, and then they did the insurance study. And in the insurance study, they found that we're no longer talking about premium as the total cost of risk. Now it's premium, your deductible, and your expenses for safety and protection on that. And the companies who increased their deductibles, rather, they found had a lower total cost of risk because they looked at that out of pocket, both from post-accident, but more importantly, pre-accident, as being something that they could put on their bottom line. And I think that's what needs to be gotten out there.
Agreed. Rick, I can see you're itching.
Yep. No, I was just 100% agreement. It's like, this is, this is what you and I talk about all the time, is safety is seen as an expense until you actually study the numbers, and then you start to see that it's an investment, and the return is right there on the bottom line.
Yeah.
If you treat it as a leading indicator and not a lagging indicator.
Well,
I had a client one time, Rick, along those lines, who had $1 million deductible. Right? And I represented them across the country on cases. And the CEO one year said to me, he said, the bottom line is my bottom line next year, or my profitability next year, depends on how well you do for me in the courtroom. Because everything else is pretty much, straight variable expense. What you do and how you can protect me in the courtroom is going to go right to that bottom line. And that's, I think, what companies and a lot of the people upstream have to realize. And to realize that, to live that safety culture.
yes.
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 Yep.
Yeah, because you live that safety culture. It's like a group I was working with here recently. You know what? They're trying to figure out how do they minimize their cost, and one of the simple ones was, why don't we just stop having so many losses?
Yeah.
If we pay attention to the losses we're having, use the data to help us understand why we're having these incidents,
Right.
and let's reduce the number of incidents, it will affect the bottom line for one, but it'll also affect your premiums, because even though you may have a self-insured retention of X, right? Your folks that are fronting the insurance side of it are sitting there going, how many times are you going to keep bouncing off that top level before you break through and hit us? Right. And if you have frequency, they're going to get concerned, and they're going to continually to up your premiums. Keep that down here, keep it down the bottom. Them underwriters are going to look at you and go, wow, you got this under control. I'm quite happy. And it's going to have a huge reflection on your bottom line.
The dreaded loss run, John.
Yes. So true. So true. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I think that's about where we cut it off here. This has been great conversation, Doug. Thank
Absolutely
you very
phenomenal.
much.
Thanks so
So-
much.
Thank you
Doug.
very much. Very, very honored to be part of the podcast and the broadcast, and great to do it. Thank you so
Well,
much
thank
for
you. Your
inviting me.
information's
Yeah.
been awesome.
And we'll be there tomorrow for your safety and slogans webinar. Looking forward
Excellent.
to it.
Yeah, looking forward
Excellent.
to that. So
Really
cool.
appreciate it. Thanks,
Cool.
guys.
All right. Take care,
All
Doug.
right. Hang
Thanks
on
so
a
much.
sec here.
Compliance Clips is a joint production of Summit Risk Solutions and Links Consulting. Thanks so much for being with us today. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you in our next release. Take care.